Hello everyone, I welcome you all in the class of English Literature. Today we will go through
Chapter
chapter
number 17.
that is To Serve with Love. Students, To Serve with Love is a 1959 autobiographical novel by Eustace Edward Ricardo Braithwaite, born in 1912, known as E.R. Braithwaite, set in the East End of London. The novel is based on true events concerned with Braithwaite taking up a teaching post in a Greenslade school there. This story is composed in 22 chapters. It has a novel also with 22 chapters with every possible detail which give a remarkable insight into the politics of race and a class in post-war London. The incidents of this story represent a real turning point in Rick Braithwaite's relations with his pupils. At the beginning of the chapter, he takes them on a field trip to the Victoria and Albert Museum. Braithwaite is greatly encouraged by the enthusiasm of his pupils during the field trip. Students, To Serve with Love is a work of fiction based on the life of the author E.R. Braithwaite, who went to teach in the notoriously rough East End of London after World War II. The main character, Ricardo Braithwaite, works as an engineer in an urban oil refinery before emigrating to England shortly before World War II. During the war, Braithwaite serves as a member of the Royal Air Force, that is RAF, but then is unable to find employment after the war ends because he is black. As a last resort, a stranger convinces Braithwaite to apply to become a teacher, and he is accepted at the Greenslade School in London's East End, set to teach the senior class. The time period in which the story takes place is important. The book is set after World War II, during which black people fought and died alongside their white compatriots, only to come back home, whether to Britain or the United States, and find that racism was still very much present. Braithwaite finds that even though he considers himself British and has served in the Royal Air Force, the English do not consider him to be one of them. This leads Braithwaite to resent the English and colonialism, as well as what he seems to think is the relative ease that his white students have had in their lives. Braithwaite's teaching position starts out roughly. He considers his students disrespectful, and his students consider him to be an arrogant outsider, unfamiliar with the social environment in which they have grown up. The students harass Braithwaite, slamming their desks while he is lecturing using foul language, and ultimately burning a sanitary napkin in the classroom. This is the last straw for Braithwaite, who verbally berated the girls for acting in an unladylike manner. Realizing that his outburst has not gained him any respect, Braithwaite changes tactics, deciding to interact with them as though they are adults with agency. He requires every girl be referred to as Miss and that his students call him Sir. At first, the students find this level of difference ridiculous. However, they come around after only a few weeks, completely changing both their hygiene and their attitudes towards one another. To increase the class cultural exposure, Braithwaite takes them on field trips to museums and theaters to which many of the students have never been. A white female teacher, Gillian Blanchard, accompanies the class on these excursions, the beginning of a friendship which blossoms into romance between Blanchard and Braithwaite. The romance faces multiple tests, primarily concerning societal prejudice against mixed race couples during this era in Britain. Similarly, Braithwaite's relationship with his students is tested many times. Braithwaite must learn to navigate between the social norms, including prejudice of the outside world and the relatively safe community he has built with his students. Now, the story centers around Braithwaite's growth as a character, from a selfish individual who merely seeks employment and lacks empathy to a loving surrogate father for his students. Although his students frequently disappoint him, Braithwaite learns to forgive them, and they in turn constantly surprise him with their maturity, empathy, and knowledge. The story is written in the past tense as Braithwaite looks back on the events of his first year of teaching. However, the chronological perspective is never made explicit, so the reader does not know the age of the narrator while he tells the story. Due to this approach, the narrator knows that the audience does not understand. He gains a kind of omnipotence, leading to a healthy amount of foreshadowing. Consequently, this also leads the reader to place a level of trust in the narrator that is uncommon for first person narratives. Another facet of the story which greatly affects its narrative lies in the heavy history of colonialism involved in Braithwaite's experiences. Braithwaite is originally from British Guiana, now Guyana, a British colony adjacent to Brazil. Although geographically located in South America, British Guiana was considered part of the British West Indies and is culturally similar to the Caribbean, as its indigenous population are part of the Taino people. Braithwaite constantly feels the prejudicial effects of colonialism while living in England after World War II, and these negative experiences frequently shape his thoughts and actions. In 1967, he turned his story into a novel and then into a film by the same name, resetting the story in 1960s America. This action led the film to lose the novel's heavy colonial emphasis, among other differences. Also historically relevant to the novel or stories, the infamous East End itself, although it was the site of music halls and theatres. Its residents were and are frequently considered criminals, as the area's impoverished nature leads to high levels of crime. It is also the killing ground of Jack the Ripper and is contemporarily associated with high levels of gang activity. Throughout the East End's history, it has always been poor and overcrowded, leaving diseased and building collapses to claim many lives. It is the source of the Cockney identity, which has Jewish, Romani, and other immigrant influences. It was heavily bombed during both World War I and World War II, leaving many areas condemned, and the damage remained for decades. Braithwaite is routinely shocked by the conditions in which these students live, and the physical trauma of the war can be seen throughout his teaching environment. So, students, in this story, the incidents represent a real turning point in Rick Braithwaite's relationship with his pupils that I told you earlier. And at the beginning of the chapter, he takes them on a field trip to the Victoria and Albert Museum. So, Braithwaite is greatly encouraged by the enthusiasm of his pupils during the field trip. For students, To Serve with Love is a work of fiction based on the life of the author E.R. Braithwaite that I told you earlier. So now this story is completed here. And if you don't understood, go through the chapter again. Now it's time to do question answers and exercises. So students, we will meet in next chapter. Till then, stay blessed, stay safe. Thank you students. Bye bye.